Well, this is BizCheck, and we want to get into the second conversation of the program. My colleague there on the sign language interpretation, that is Anne Wangeshi. I had earlier told you it's Caroline Joroge. No, that is Anne Wangeshi. Apologies for that. And my name is Betty Kiptum. We want to talk about the 2026 economic outlook. Now, the World Bank as well as the International Monetary Fund, IMF, projected this year's GDP growth to be about 4.9%. Up from 4.7% that we recorded in 2024. And we would like to talk about what exactly will be driving this growth and what risks the economy is facing this year. To have this conversation is the Institute of Certified Public Accountants of Kenya, that is ICPAK Chairman, CPA Professor Elizabeth Kalunda. Karibu sana, Elizabeth, Professor.
Thank you so much, Betty, for having me here, and Happy New Year to the viewers.
Happy New Year to you too, on their behalf, of course. 4.9%. What does that number tell you, and what are the projections of ICPAK, if any?
Yeah, so thank you so much, Betty, for that question, and also just sitting here today at the beginning, at the early start of the year, to look at how the economy is going to be. Yes, looking at the projections that have been given by the CS National Treasury, we are projecting a 4.9% growth. I would say that is quite optimistic. And looking at the assumptions under which those projections have been done, it will be good to look at the numbers deeper to see, is that going to be a reality, or we are simply maybe just being very optimistic. Yeah, so as we continue with the discussions, we are going to look at how are these numbers coming in. But generally, just looking at them before going into the depth of the matter, looking at the mega projects that the government is having, we have the Mau Rironi, that mega road that is there. We are hoping that by completion of that road, there's going to be improved transport, there's going to be opening of opportunities around those areas. But the big question should be, what are we going to be transporting using that road? Because I'll take that road as a pipeline, but so what are we going to be putting in? So we need to look at issues industrialization, and we need to look at, are we preparing ourselves to, in terms of the other activities, other economic activities, to ensure that the 4.9 growth is a reality. Again, looking at maybe impacts food security, we have also mega projects that the government is undertaking. We have the Galana Kulalu project, which with the, looking at the projections and where we are, maybe we might make it or not, but indeed, if we are going to put our focus on that, we are going to get the 4.9 growth. Yeah, but we'll look at the matters in depth so that we are able to see exactly what can we do so that we are actually there. Yeah,
I like that you mentioned the issue of construction of major projects, major infrastructure projects that are coming up. Construction rebound was one of the key drivers of the economy last year, and it's projected to continue driving the economy. There was also the clearing of pending bills in the construction sector, in the infrastructure sector, that really pushed that particular economic sector. So what do you foresee for 2026, specifically with the input of the infrastructure projects that are ongoing?
Okay, now looking at that one major project, that is the Rironi Mau Naivasha Road, the big question here would be, how is the funding coming in? And we've had a lot of discussion in terms of how it's funded, and we can see that clearly we've come in with a new model. Previously, all these projects were being funded 100% by borrowing, but we can see now the funding is internal. Actually, we can say it's a PPP arrangement of some sorts. We have NSSF that is actually using the Kenyans' money to support that infrastructure. We also have the China Road and Bridge Company working on that. And also now what we're anticipating that every shilling that we put in that project, the infrastructure fund, is going to actually attract another shilling. Actually 9 more shillings or 10. Yeah, so maybe what looking at that, it's a big plus for the country if it works well, and there's going to be transparency, there's going to be accountability, because we've reduced the borrowing cost, and more fundamentally looking at the Chinese government funding this. we are actually coming out of the dollar situation fix that we've been in, and that has been quite instrumental in trying to stabilize the Kenyan currency to the US dollar. So for me, that's a big plus. But as an institute, what we need to watch out, because ICPAK is the, actually we are the custodians of financial integrity in the country. So what we need to ensure is that there's a lot of accountability, openness, transparency, and clarity in terms of the contracts that are there to ensure that the funding is going to be right. Again, looking at the previous years in terms of the growth in the construction sector, the most interesting statistics is that if you look at the growth in the construction sector vis-a-vis the constructions that are going on, including those of the housing levy, in a way the growth does not seem to really match. Yeah, because the growth is not as huge as the projects that we're being told. So we need to monitor what exactly is happening. And in terms of maybe the other multiplier effect, in terms of the jobs that are created there, are those jobs able to now just bring the multiplier effect to ensure that the Kenyans actually get jobs and the money is used in the country? Yeah.
I will dig deeper into ICPAK being the custodians of financial integrity in just a little bit. But let me ask you about the Rironi Mau Summit, the road, you know, linking Nairobi to the food basket of Kenya. That particular road, as you've mentioned, is going to open up very many opportunities, being that that region is the food basket of the country. So when you talked about the issue of industrialization.
Yes, sure.
What is your view in terms of the government investing in industrialization and ensuring that we are producing to take advantage of the infrastructure that is being laid out?
Yeah. Okay, yeah, now looking at the government priorities and for the current government, one of the key priorities that have been in the Vision 2030 and also in the beta economy is the issue of making Kenya a middle income, and this is going to be through industrialization. Now, unfortunately, looking at the statistics and even the the budget policy statement that has been out, we see there's a mismatch in terms of how much funds have been dedicated to just making industries grow and spur. Because looking at the FDI, we can see that there's been a lot of walkout of foreign companies from Kenya, and that is actually, most of them are closing the industry. So there we're actually missing the target. Again, looking at the issue of creating an enabling environment for industries to be built in Kenya. I think our tax regime has been quite unfair. It has been quite repressive, and it is actually sending out potential investors. Another thing on the industrialization bit is that if we look at probably maybe the factors that would make industries grow in Kenya, where we have the special economic zones, we've not seen a lot of growth in that area. So the government needs to be very specific, and looking at just the principles of industrialization. As a country, we need to actually stop having so many projects that are running and focus on key areas. And one of the areas that I would recommend, and even ICPAK would recommend, is the issue of industrialization. So let's look at which industries are these that we want. Yeah, and looking at Kenya as a country that we say our economy is agriculture-based or agriculture-run, we need to move from primary producers or primary exporters of the agricultural produce. Let us focus on agro-processing. Let us create value. Let us add value on our primary produce, and this will actually improve on our GDP. So looking at industrialization, my key maybe message here would be, let us focus on key priority areas, and connecting the food production that we're expecting to have in the Galana Kulalu area. I think that would be something that is going to be very significant. Again, adding on maybe the question of industrialization, if we are able to actually have industries maybe around the Galana Kulalu area, that would actually really improve the economy of that area, considering it's an area where there's not much development, but we can really create opportunities and make that area grow. Yeah, so those are some of the issues that if addressed, the reality of the 4.9 growth will no longer be a mirage or just numbers that we have missed projects, or mixed projection, but it's going to be a reality that we can even hit more than that. Yeah.
With agriculture being at the core of Kenya's economy, there is the risk of the impending drought that is coming up. Of course, the weatherman already warned us about that and said Kenyans should prepare for that. At the same time, the government has been very intentional in investing in irrigation-based agriculture. So what do you foresee in terms of these risks towards agriculture, which is a core of our economy?
Yeah, actually, I come from the eastern region,
right,
and it's quite unfortunate that I was at home during the holidays, and I found that most of the areas, especially the Kitui, the Asal, not the Machakos area, there's actually food failure, there's serious crop failure, and that is an indicator that indeed, in terms of food security, there's a threat on that. In other areas, there was a lot of rain. I think the weather was quite unfair. It had excesses and maybe deficiencies on the other side. So looking at that area and maybe what the weatherman said, it's a matter that it's not new in Kenya. We've been having the unfair weather, and recently there was just a joke that was going around, but which I support what the president was saying. The president was saying that we actually don't need rain, we need water. Yeah, so if we are able to harness and trap the water that comes from the rain or get other sources of water, we are going to solve our food security problem. So the main thing would be, do we have dams? What is happening in the dams that are there? I know we've had previously projects that relate to the dam, but we've seen that they didn't actually take off. Some of them are white elephant projects. So these are some of the issues that we really need to check, because looking at Kenya, our policies, our plans, we still have this bucket that is leaking, because we put our plans, we put our monies in the bucket, but the bucket seems to have holes, and the holes are not few, they're quite big, so that whatever comes out is actually even more than what we are putting in. So let's watch on corruption. Let us watch and even trying to recover those amounts, prosecuting those who are actually who are perpetrating those corruptions on these projects that are going to, if they were to work, they are going to transform the nation. So let's check on some of those issues. Yeah.
When you look at this country, the country has enough. There is enough. To cater for every need that Kenyans have. But somehow corruption has continued to grow despite the numerous attempts to deal with it. You said that accountants, ICPAK rather, is the custodian of financial integrity, in your own words. What more can be done? And is this even something that we can deal with as a country? Yeah, okay. Now, corruption is a cancer that is really eating our country, and it is a threat to the economic growth. It is a threat to the current generation and to future generations. As ICPAK, we've been having collaborations with EACC in terms of just trying to unearth some of these corruptions, because looking at corruption and the way it's done in Kenya, it's the briefcase style, where from the accounting side, we've captured the wrong numbers. So we've been trying to, not really trying, this is a drive that we've been doing in terms of ensuring that our accountants are ethical in their reporting, to ensure that our accountants have avenues to report corruption that happens under their eyes, because as accountants, we know sometimes you are forced to do things that are not right by those who, I mean, you're actually intimidated to do what is not right. So we have the whistleblowing policy, and looking again at matters corruption as an institute. Whenever we have any of our member who is mentioned on corruption issues, we have a disciplinary process that can actually, that is legal. We have the disciplinary committee that can follow up on members who are not doing what is right. And looking at the country generally from a corruption perspective, one of the key pillars of strategic plans of ICPAK is the issue of public interest. And that is where we need to safeguard the public resources by supporting all institutions that have been mandated to actually fight corruption. And as I previously said, EACC is really one of our big partners. I would also want to mention that
some of this corruption, you'll find that the financial reports that are produced, actually, when the auditor goes through them, and now this is speaking on the space of the government where we have the Auditor General, we find that whatever recommendations, whatever findings that come up are findings where the Auditor General is saying that these books actually don't reflect the true financial position, and that's where we have the qualified reports. And what we are hoping that this year will happen is that we'll have legislative reforms. We'll be able to have support where all the recommendations of the Auditor General are going to be followed and reviewed, and any maybe any government entity that is not following on the recommendation, they should be put to task and even made to answer. Because looking at maybe last year when we were doing the evaluation, we found that around 6.1 maybe billion or trillion, a very huge figure of what is captured in the financial statement is actually is not supported by any documentation. So those are some of the avenues where we want to ensure that we are going to follow up on the findings that have been there, and we'll hope to get support, and our stakeholders are very positive in trying to have that legislative reform. Yeah,
we've seen time and time again that these reports come out. Of course, the media goes through them very critically, bring up these stories about corruption and the allegations, and then it becomes a war of words between, county governments, national government officials, and the Office of the Auditor General. And so, from your perspective, what can be done to make sure that the officers that are charged with ensuring financial integrity, from your side as ICPAK, EACC, the OAG and all other officers, what can be done to ensure that they are more empowered, or their work can be more productive in terms of dealing with corruption? Okay,
yeah. Now, one, for the accountants, what we are hoping should happen is that, and especially at the county level, we note that offices or positions that are supposed to be held by accountants are actually not held by accountants. So it's as simple as saying that you have a doctor, you have a hospital, you have people who are calling themselves doctors, and you're expecting these people to treat the patient. That will definitely not happen. So the same case is happening in our profession. And we have engaged with the Council of County Governors in our speeches, in our press releases, where, and even in our reports, we normally give the reports and giving the qualification of those who are actually preparing those books. So we've seen that a majority of them are not accountants, and we are appealing because from a legal point, some of these positions, the law is not clear that the positions must be held by an accountant. So we are hoping that, and we are really putting a strong fight on this, that these positions are going to be held by accountants. And when these positions are held by accountants, we as an institute, we have the mandate to regulate that profession. If you do what is not right, we'll take you through a disciplinary process. So that actually is going to really help in that. The other thing is that we also need to have citizens who are accountable, because currently what is happening is that the voice of Mwananchi has come very strong. So we want to empower Mwananchi to be, and this is from Wanjiko, let me just put it from Wanjiko, so that Wanjiko can be able to understand whenever the Auditor General releases the report, they should be able to understand what exactly does this mean. Because principally what that means is that the taxes that we pay, and this is, and you know how our pay slips are heavily taxed, the pay slips that the taxes that we pay, they're actually being mismanaged. And the reason why they're being mismanaged is because we don't have legislation that can actually protect that. So if Mwananchi will be knowing that any shilling stolen is actually a denial of a social service that they need, I think that will going to create a lot of traction. So we'll do the sensitization. We are going to look at how the laws can be amended. We are going to have engagement so that even without the law, maybe the governance will know that this position ideally should be held by a professional. So those are some of the things that are going on. And as I'd mentioned before, other than just having those advanced reports or the qualified reports, what we want to do is that we want to have a system or a policy that ensures that all recommendations are being addressed. Otherwise, whenever you look at the recommendation year after year, we always have the same reports where we say we have unaccounted for expenditure, we didn't get documented. I mean, the same story year after year. So we need to take action in terms of implementation, and if that is not done, then there should be a reprimand system to ensure that it is done.
Right.
Yeah.
Let us hope that those measures actually bear fruit, you know, in the long term. Let's talk about another tenet of the economy this year, and there's the issue of borrowing, from not from a government perspective, but the private sector lending. Central Bank has been very intentional in bringing down the CBR. It's at around 9.5% now, down from 11.25 in early 2025. But when you look at the lending rates of the financial sector, they are not reflecting this. And you would expect that there's more private sector credit, but it's not reflecting. So what would be your thought on this?
Okay, now in terms of the interest rates, because the interest rates are again one of the parameters when we are looking at economic development and even the economic outlook, I would want to really commend the CBK through the Monetary Policy Committee for recently reducing the CBA rate to 9.5. Which is quite I mean, it went down from the previous one. And going now back to the question in terms of how comes the loans are not coming at that rate. Now, looking again at what is happening with the CBK, they have actually mandated the banks to use the credit, the risk-based lending, so that when you are borrowing, then there should be a formula that is being used. And the banks actually have come up with the formulas. If you are a member of any bank or customer, I'm sure you've received mails telling you this is now the new rate. There's a formula that has been created where that formula will definitely, okay, because now when it comes to the final lending rate, it is it's a model where you have that rate from the CBK, and then they use the risk premium and any other factor that has been allowed by the new formula. So the rates will not go down to 9.5, but they'll definitely be lower, and the CBK is really monitoring. The banks are actually under scrutiny in terms of what rates they are using. So I'm seeing the banking, the lending rates from the commercial banks will go down, and that's a very big plus in terms of looking at economic projections. But then now the key issue, which I'm foreseeing a big problem, looking at the budgetary policy statement and the budget estimates that were there, I think our budget for next year is around 4.6 trillion. We have a deficit of 1.1 trillion Kenya shillings. And looking at how the government is intending to fill in that gap, the government actually has is projecting that 1 trillion, I think 1.0 something, which is almost 92% of the deficit is going to be provided domestically. Now, and then the remainder, which is less than a trillion, is going to be funded using foreign debt. Now, for me, it's a story that it's a paradox in a way, because the government is in a deficit, the government is going to borrow locally and then now compete with the private sector lending. So I'm seeing a lot of maybe crowding out effect, that's the term we use, where the market will be so crowded, but the crowd is actually made by the government. So, and if you look at the risk of the government vis-a-vis a normal client, then any institution would go to where there's the less risk. So there's going to be definitely a squeeze in the credit available. And looking at it from an economic point of view, actually that will actually reduce the development that we want. Because if I have a farm, if I have a factory, if I want to borrow, I'll not be able to get that money, because there are other better options of doing that. So that's something that the government needs to relook, because a lot of domestic borrowing actually has a counter effect to the private sector borrowing in that country. But then now looking at it, maybe what the government is trying to balance is trying to ensure that in terms of our forex and even the stability of our currency, it's trying to maintain to retain that. So you can see this is a very delicate issue. So what the government can do, and even the lenders, can we have maybe special financial institutions that would lend to entrepreneurs, or even lend to industries, I mean the industrialist, so that there's a dedicated fund that is out there that will help build these industries. And when we have industries, we are going to be producing for the local market, for the export. We are going to be creating jobs, and here we are going to have jobs that have dignity, because there's been a lot of conversation in terms of how is our workforce? What are these jobs that the president and the government has been saying they've been creating? The sector that has been having a lot of scrutiny is the housing sector, where we are having the housing levy and the houses that are out there. But looking at the jobs that are there, those are not jobs that we are going to give our graduates. I mean, how would a graduate do that? I mean, there would be better jobs. Let's look at jobs with dignity. And it is through industrialization that we can be able to get that. And then just again to follow up, because these things are so interrelated. For the economy to grow, I mean, you build pillar one, it creates pillar two and that. Looking again at the jobs that are there in the industries, how is our education system? Is it able to create entrepreneurs? So if we are going to fund our education, if we are going to have a revolution, a transformation in our education system that is going to create maybe job makers, to create people who can come up with industries, produce goods, I think that would be a very big win for the country. So we need to look at things holistically, not individually, because these things are intertwined. Yeah.
They truly are intertwined. One thing that we cannot not talk about during this conversation is politics.
Yes.
Yeah, the political risk that there is. I mean, 2027 is an election year for Kenya, and for some reason, our campaigns start in the middle of, you know, the term, so they're already ongoing.
Yeah.
What does this mean for the economy this year?
Oh my. Yeah, so that's something that looking at the projections, the 4.9 growth, I don't think that has factored in that politics, because we know in Kenya this is not something new, but of late it's becoming quite serious. Once we've done the election, the next year immediately we are campaigning for the next period. And again, since we had the by-elections recently, we can actually see how the economy, I mean, how there's that correlation between the elections and the economy, because we can see the IEBC used around 600 million for the by-election of those. I think there were around 24 seats that were out there. Now, we are getting into the election season. 2027 will be a very highly contested election, because one, we have the Gen Z issue that came in that clearly was a pointer that the kind of leaders that we have are not the leaders that the young generation requires. So there's going to be a lot of heated campaigns around that. Again, there's the issue of the one-term, two-term, and the grand opposition. So looking at those factors, which in Kenya, the economy and politics cannot separate. I'm seeing a situation where a lot of funds for major projects, major social projects are going to be diverted to elections, to IEBC, and others maybe through other maybe constitutional or unconstitutional means, they are going to be used in the election. So I would really say that the economic outlook is going to be lower. I mean, in terms of the growth, definitely the 4.9 growth rate, unless other parameters are going to be higher so that they offset this, I'm seeing a situation where even the focus of our policy makers is going to be more on re-election than on development. And for me, what I would want to maybe request the government, or how the policies are made, is that the guys who make decisions about the growth of our country, these people should be separated from politicians. Because if we have politicians holding certain offices, definitely right now they're in the election mode. They are not into policy, they are not under development. So as an institute, we need to really ensure that what had been budgeted is actually what is going to be spent, and we ensure that every single tax that a Kenyan is taxed is actually going to go for development, not just going for politics, which I could say is money that has just gone, I mean, that has just disappeared with the wind. Yeah, so, and also, again, looking at being a just the eve of the politics, I'm seeing a lot of capital flight. Definitely investors, for them, it's a wait and see. period, so they are waiting now. They want to see how the elections will go on. So it's quite unfortunate that we are in that situation. We have this ambitious economic outlook coming from the government, but things on the ground don't maybe support that. And again, to just add on the election, because the issue of geopolitics are also important. Looking at what is happening in now maybe the US, this is the superpower. We've seen what President Trump did to Venezuela, the issue of the oil that they have captured. Again, that might have an effect on the oil supply. We are yet to see exactly what's going to happen. There were some changes in the oil prices when they announced that they have captured the Venezuela oil. And again, looking at now some of the policies that are coming from the Trump or the US government, and one of these is going to really affect Kenya is I think early this week, the American government said that they have introduced a 1% tax on any remittances that will be sent outside maybe the formal or the regulated system. Yeah. Now, if we look at our economy and even what is in the budgetary policy statement, there's the issue of the diaspora remittances. This really contribute a lot in terms of our foreign reserves and also just supporting the economy in the Kenya. So this might have an effect in a way. We are yet to see. So I'm hoping the money, the remittances that come to Kenya through the diaspora come from the conventional channels. Otherwise, if it comes the other side, that means they'll send less, because again the other amount is going to be absorbed by the tax that is there. Yeah, so for me, what I would maybe urge them, our citizens in the diaspora, let them use the formal ways of sending money. Even for us as a country, we'll be able to know how much really do we get from the diaspora remittances. Yeah.
Right, I think that's a very wholesome answer to that question. Thank you for that. We are coming to an end of the conversation, Prof, and I'd like you to just give us your closing remarks, generally the outlook for 2026 for you.
Okay, now my closing remarks, which should resonate to maybe Wanjiko, who is or in a layman way, is that when we are looking at the economic outlook, what we as Kenyans would want to see is that, one, are we able to afford the food? Are we able to put a meal on the table, and a decent meal, without spending so much? So maybe my outlook or my projection on that is that that might not be the reality, because one, we have the mist, the food prices will definitely go out because of the rains. Again, we have the disposable income that has gone down because again of the I think it's the NSSF contributions starting this year are going to be more, so we are going to have less in our pockets. Again, the other question would be, especially for the young ones, those who are in school, will they be able to get jobs? Because that again is another measure. Now, looking at how our economy is, we are churning out around 2 million graduates every year in the various categories. But again, the only jobs that we are creating are 1 million. So that means that there's going to be more unemployment. Now, the other issue that I would want to again look as just my closing shot is that for the private sector, for the industrialists, for those of us who want to start businesses, there'll be less money to borrow because of the crowding out of the government. So the government should try and relook on how will they, maybe unless they come up with maybe some innovative way that, like the infrastructure, the privatization issues that are coming out, then that is going to be an issue. Another issue that as just we wrap up is that will the Kenyan shilling be stable? Because that again will affect our imports, our export. Now, looking at the outlook, there's a likelihood that it might stabilize in a way, but we don't know how the elections will be there. And finally, not very finally, the second last finally is on the issue of what is the role of Mwananchi? For me, Mwananchi should be able to understand what is happening. They should be able to voice their voices whenever there's public participation. They should actually participate in any of the bills that are out there, especially that touch on us. And finally, to the government has promised that this year they're not going to introduce new taxes. What they will do is to increase the tax base. But my major concern, especially as a CPA, as the chairman of the institute, is that the new rules of ETIMS, where every single expense for it to be allowable will have to go through the ETIMS. Now that is actually for me a danger, because the very, very small micro businesses, they don't have the ETIMS. So it means that any buyer is going to actually overstep that and go to the next level, and that might kill the economy. So Kenyans, please, let's embrace the year as it is. I wish you very well in this new year. Let us be vigilant. Thank you.
Let us be vigilant. Thank you very much. I have been speaking with CPA Professor Elizabeth Kalunda. She is the chairman of the Institute of Certified Public Accountants of Kenya, ICPAK, and we have been discussing the 2026 economic outlook for Kenya, of course, with the risks including the agriculture probably dipping because of the impending drought, as well as matters politics. But of course, as she says, there are some upsides. The construction industry infrastructure is also picking up really nicely, so we shall be on the lookout on how the economy shall go and continue to inform you. This has been BizCheck. My name is Betty Kiptum, and Anne Wangeshi there is my colleague on the sign language interpretation. Thank you very much for watching, and enjoy the rest of your viewing. Coming up at the top of the hour will be Kurunzi Mashinani. Do stay with Channel 1. Bye-bye.